Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the third and final chapter in the book of Habakkuk. Now, the name Habakkuk translates as to wrestle or embrace, and this is significant because in the Hebrew culture, names were not arbitrarily attached to the recipient as they are in our own, but very much signal a function to be fulfilled by that person. And we do witness Habakkuk fulfill both functions as the narrative progresses. The first chapter consists of two questions of his, and Yahweh answers in the middle. And the second chapter is the answer to the second question, and then the third chapter is an expression of praise. So as we progress through the trajectory, we witness that the prophet has doubts and questions which he takes to Yahweh, things that he wrestles with. Struggles with. They were born of observations indicative of his historical circumstance in which the righteous were suffering and the unjust were flourishing. And now Yahweh gives him a lot that maybe he would disagree on, such as, for instance, as awful as the internal implosion of morality was, they had an external virus, the Babylonians, who would soon subsume them, and Judah as an independent nation would cease to exist. But by the third chapter, he satisfactorily praises the answer, so he comes to embrace what he once wrestled with. And the implicit instruction we can profit from is to, if ever we have doubts, we may make them known to Yahweh. We are to not have a blind faith, but an open relationship with the object of our faith, according to which we can approach him with any doubts or struggles. And it's better to doubt out loud than to harbor unbelief in silence. And if we do take that doubt to Yahweh, he can perfect our faith and provide us with the answer. And this demands a listening on our behalf. So prayer and meditation are often regarded as segregated entities, but they ought to be regarded as the harmonious counterparts of the same equation, according to which we enter into a dialogue with divinity. Now, the voice of the Almighty speaks in many forms and manifestations, but the spiritually attuned person will be able to hear that voice in whatever form it comes. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, on melodious instruments. So what we're about to read are the lyrics to a psalm, which was an expression of religious praise set to music, but we have no notion of the notation or instrumentation with which the ancient Hebrews would have been familiar with it. So we just want to imagine this as a song, but not to the extreme of inventing our own melodies for it. O Yahweh, I have heard your report. I was afraid. O Yahweh, renew your work in the midst of the years. Make it known in the midst of the years. In wrath, remember compassion. So he had just analyzed and assessed, having recently heard the report indicated in the second chapter, and there's a lot that brings him, stimulates fear in any recipient of that message's heart, namely that the nation in which they lived was going to cease to exist and be no more. And but our fears can solidify our faith, and fear and faith are, strictly speaking, antagonist. They cannot inhabit the same vessel in the same time, but the fear of Yahweh is the fear which expels all other fears. So he had made it known, so what was once mysterious was revealed to him in advance. And he's petitioning him to, in wrath, remember mercy or compassion. So he knows that the blow of the Babylonian conquest has to come, but he's petitioning him to be merciful in as much as the circumstance allows. And mercy and wrath are, from human standpoints, are contradictory. We think of justice in the terms of administering punitive measures to the offender, and mercy as the sparing of them, but that's because we're imperfect creatures, and in divinity, that is one of the paradoxical perfections of his nature. Eloah comes from Taman, and from the sacred one from Mount Paran. Salah. His splendor shall cover the heavens, and his praise shall fill the earth. So the term Salah indicates a silent pause for meditation, and they are a literary device employed by the writers of Psalms. We see them frequently throughout the Psalms, which are to, strictly speaking, inspire the reader to meditatively contemplate. So we just want to give that the attention, the appropriate attention it is due, and not read it too fast. Now, what he says, he identifies Elohah in the singular term, Taman and Mount Paran, which were two historically significant sites where the presence and power of divinity manifest. But he's saying that there's no limitation, it not be confined to so limited a scope, because it's universal throughout the heavens of the earth. There is no quarter or section of the universe where the divine presence does not dwell. And the brightness is as the light he has raised from his hand, and there his power is hidden. So he's the author and orchestrator of the light which shines from the sun and all other stars. The universe is far more extensive than our solar system alone, but he is the source of the light. He spoke it into existence. We read in Genesis 1:3, and his power is also hidden. So even though he's omnipotent, he doesn't flaunt or flex his omnipotence unless occasion demands for a divine intervention. And that is a complex subject, the overlap of divine providence and human agency, which merits its own discussion, separate from the one we are currently delivering. Before him goes pestilence, and a burning flame goes forth at his feet. So he's the author not only of constructive elements of nature, but also destructive. So pestilence, they eat crops wherever they go. They wipe out, they create famines. And flames burns everything in its path. So that is all under his control, and he can use the negative elements in nature to accomplish his will. He shall stand and measure the earth. He shall look and shake the nations, and the ancient mountains are shattered. The age-old hills shall bow. His ways are everlasting. So the everlasting or eternal nature is contrasted with the ancient mountains and age-old hills, which are old to us but young to the eternal. They are with a definite beginning in the place of time, whereas he who created all is timeless and exists outside of its parameters, is not controlled by, but is very much controlling of. And he is also omnipotent, so he all the powers, the geopolitical entities at any time in the earth are all under his control, and he can easily take one up and rise one up and take one down. And he shall stand and measure the earth. That is an allusion to judgment, measuring, whereby we are measured according to our moral qualities. I saw the tents of Cushan under sorrow, the curtains of the land of Midian tremble. So Cush and Midian are two neighboring nations of ancient Israel. Midianites were descended from also from Abraham. He fathered that nation, and Cush would have been in Africa, corresponding roughly north of Ethiopia, and between that and Egypt. Shall Yahweh burn against the rivers? Is your displeasure against the rivers? Is your wrath against the sea? That you ride on your horses, your chariots of salvation? So this is a rhetorical question. He doesn't disturb the rivers because they have done anything wrong. Human beings are the sole created creature with the capacity to disobey its intended nature. So he orchestrates the natural elements in a destructive direction against disobedient man, more specifically the covenant nation who had failed to honor their end of the covenant. You uncover your bow, the oaths of the rod, and of the word, Salah. You cut through the earth with rivers. So there, he's uncovering his bow. That means it's in a state of preparation for eventual usage, and these are the fulfillment of his promises, the rod of his word. The rod would have been a negative instrument of punishment, but the word also contains a punitive aspect to it, as well as a redemptive and a positive one. And so you cut through the earth with rivers. Now the Earth, any continent, any of the six continents are bound to be have rivers in them which cut through them. The mountains shall see you, they tremble. The storm of water shall pass over. The deep shall give forth its voice. It shall lift up his hands. So all this entails an element of the natural elements being in control and submission and unable to resist the encroachment of divine interventions. Mountains cannot literally tremble, but they would if they could. And and all the others, the deep shall give forth its voice, that is a voice of the Almighty, which manifests in many forms and varieties and components. And sun, moon shall stand still in their places. Like light your arrows fly, like lightning is your glittering spear. So there was one occasion where the sun ceased to go down in the book of Joshua, which was a miraculous manifestation, but it's an uncommon one. But at the end times, we have the assurance that the sun and moon will be ultimately unnecessary in the new heaven and new Jerusalem, because Elohim itself will be the light and satisfactorily dispel all the darkness in that blessed abode. You step through the earth in rage. You thresh the Gentiles in wrath. So this is a statement of his control of the geopolitical dynamics. The Gentiles would have been every other nation. So even though they were not related to Yahweh by religion or covenant, they were still very much objects of his concern. And you shall go forth to save your people, to save your appointed. You shall smite the head from the house of the wicked, by laying bare from foundations to neck. Salah. So the appointed would have been the nation of Israel and Judah, to whom Yahweh was specifically and specially related via the terms of a covenant. They were created for a divine purpose, and they will not be forsaken, even though they may have to go into captivity for a while. And the house of the wicked, now one of the natures of Habakkuk's laments was the flourishing of the unjust and their prosperity coming from the expense of the righteous, but all wrongs will be righted in the end completely and totally. And you shall pierce with his own arrows the neck of his leaders. They stormed along to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. So this is an expression of the Babylonians to come, but he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. So the parallel practical application is that you use weapons, and you will have those weapons be used against you in the form of shooting an arrow and having it come back right to hit you in this literary context. And you shall tread the sea with your horses, the foaming of many waters. I heard, and my body trembled. My lips quivered at the sound. Rottenness came into my bones, and I trembled within myself. So this is a fearful experience. Now the manifestation of this vision is one of the revelatory mediums, also dreams and other varieties. But Habakkuk was given a vision, and the vision caused him to tremble, and his lips quivered at the sound. That is the same state of abject fearfulness. Though the fig tree does not blossom, and there is no fruit on the vine, the yield of the olive has failed, and the field brought forth no food. The flock has been cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stall. So this is an essential extinction of animal life, domestic animal life, according to which each civilization was dependent upon, be it in the fruit of the vine, so garden foods or other food sources from farming. And yet I exult in Yahweh. I rejoice in the Elohim of my salvation. So even though what he has just described is not strictly speaking praiseworthy, he offers praise, and we can have joy even in the midst of our trials, inasmuch as we abide in the Spirit. And Habakkuk is living proof of that. And we can always rejoice when we're being persecuted in the one who will save us from that which we are currently being persecuted. Yahweh the Master is my strength, and he makes my feet like those of deer, and he makes me walk on my high places, to the chief singers with my stringed instruments. So Yahweh is the source of solace and security, no matter when we are weak. In fact, when we are weak is when we may be made strong by leaning on his inexhaustible and unlimited strength. And he can give us the power we need to perform physical or spiritual feats. And this all ties into the focal point of Habakkuk's account, the just shall live by faith. And that concludes today's lesson. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.